Okay, we good to go?
Always good to go.
I'm just chilling at Canada Life Center.
That's the hard-hitting analysis you listen to the Level Flight podcast for.
Here we go.
Jets are a brisket team, low and slow for the first two periods, and boom, an explosion of flavor in the last few minutes of the third.
Doing all right. Better if my internet would work.
Elliot.
This is comedy. I'm Brian. I'm joined by Connor.
Hello.
And Elliot.
Hey.
Wow, that was fun.
You're listening to the Level Flight podcast.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome into the 15th edition of LFP Live. My name is Connor. I'm joined by Brian today. Elliot was unable to make it, but as Matt Hyman says in chat, it's a great day to have a great day. Thank you to everyone who's here with us live on a Sunday morning at 9 a.m. when there's even no Jets news to talk about. We really appreciate it. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I made the smart decision and took my sweater off early, so I'm not cooking in the sun at my back here. No, I'm doing great, and I'm temperature regulated.
There you go. What more can you ask for than being temperature regulated and having a good day? Yeah. As you guys can see, Brian's down at the ballpark once again. Another Goldeyes game today.
It's going to be this way for a while.
Yeah. Goldeyes game today at 1 p.m. Grab your tickets and then maybe just hope that the weather stays away. But we'll see. We'll see. It might not. Yeah. There's a lot to get to. Despite the fact that I said there was no news, there still is a pretty good chunk of stuff to get to. Elliot and I on Thursday's episode had our, first reaction to Scott Arniel's press conference. We're going to get Brian's thoughts today. I've had some more time to think about it as well. I'll give some more thoughts. And then, as you can see there on the right, we're going to talk about the Goldeyes, the Bombers, Sea Bears, a little bit summer sports update. The Western Conference final could end tonight with Edmonton at home. Could be another Canadian team going to the Cup final. For the chance to win it for the first time in, 30 years or something like that, with the Panthers punching their ticket last night. And then, as always, questions from you guys, which we might go too early because we're running out of content here. The Arniel hiring helped us out, but it's getting dry. We need some signings to drop or something. But anyways, Brian, we didn't get your thoughts on the press conference. What was your initial reaction when you watched the press conference or saw the quotes come out online from Scott Arniel, as it says on the right there, saying all the right things?
Yeah, I was the one who wrote that on the side there because everything that I've seen, I've been very impressed with what he has, said so far. I don't think I've ever felt more sort of, I need to see the actions as I have with this. But if it was just the words that I was following, I would feel great about what we've seen so far. And I do really think that when you come out and you start on a note where you say a lot of the things that people are wanting to hear, I do think now that the expectations have gone up a little. But I'm even thinking too, let's expand outside of the presser here. I know he did an appearance on the Jeff Merrick show. And he went out of his way to say that Cole Perfetti is going to be in the top 6 and he's going to get that shot. He's going to get that chance to stick. And then that also, obviously, you're not going to hear anything different, but Cole Perfetti coming out and saying that he's excited to get back into camp with Arniel and, work with him. I think the two of those things together jive better than, one separately. Right. So obviously you're not expecting anything other than from Cole, but to hear that combined with, Arniel saying, hey, maybe we'll, stick with this for a while. There's reports coming out too where teams are interested in Perfetti from, sources that typically reach. It's
typically,
I don't think there's a doubt now that I think, at least for the start of the year and seeing how things go, Cole Perfetti's a Jet and will be for a while. No, and I think, and Matt brought it up here in the chat. About the analytical approach too, where Arniel went out of his way to talk about that, and the analytics summit, and hearing the idea, Yeah, like just hearing the idea though that they're actually wanting to look deeper and figure out what other
Mhm.
teams are doing that makes them successful. Like you look at some of the past, few cup winners. The Tampa Bay Lightning have an extensive analytics department. Colorado Avalanche, we know they have an extensive analytics department.
Yeah.
All these teams are taking a bit more of a deep dive on what could be predictive, and I feel like a lot of what the Jets did that hurt them later on was getting away from the stuff that could be successful for them in favor of things they thought would work,
Mm.
but there was nothing to back that information up. Right.
Yeah.
So their eye test wasn't aligning with the repetitive things that you've seen other teams do to success. And I think that if you're going into something that has the value of the analytical community and how it's growing and
Yeah.
using that in a way that can benefit you, I don't think there's a drawback here. And I know that there's a lot of people who say you can only you can't use analytics for everything, and I don't think you can, obviously, but I
Right.
think it's important as well that they do implement something of it, because what you've seen in the past is, we've talked about internal analytics from, Paul Maurice. We've talked about,
Yeah.
things that don't seem any sort of, any sense that goes into some decisions, and maybe that will change now if they're following that approach.
Exactly. And the thing I brought up, or the main point I brought up on Thursday's episode was, yeah, this analytics talk is great. Having a summit, whatever that means, is great.
They're going to Banff again.
They're going to, yeah, they're going to Banff and they're looking at JFresh cards for 12 hours and then going back home. No, um, what really matters here is there was a part of the quote where Arniel was like, it's easy to take analytics when you're bad and just say you're bad at this, you're bad at that. But what we want to do is find parts we're good at, really press on those, and take things from other teams around the league, what they're good at, and kind of like copycat. It's copycat league. You hear that in every professional sports league. Copying what the other teams are good at and getting good at that, which will help you in the playoffs, going deep in the playoffs. I think that's great. I think the one worry I would have about the analytics comment would be if they weren't taking the right approach to present it to the players in a way that would be like mutually beneficial. So I think that's a great comment. I really like the comment of how youth are vital, and they have to be ready for the opportunity, but you also have to give them kind of the runway to be ready for that opportunity. And yeah, I've thought about this since Thursday. This is now my take. If the Winnipeg Jets hired Todd Nelson and he came in and said every single thing that Scott Arniel said, people will be planning the parade. But it's because it's Scott Arniel. He was on the coaching staff. There's organizational ties. He played for the Jets, played for the Moose, coached the Moose. Oh my God, roll our eyes. Organizational ties. That people are like, okay, this is a good first step. Let's wait and see. If this was Todd Nelson saying we're going to have an analytical summit and change the organization analytically and present it to the players, and youth are vital, like people will be like, oh my God, this guy's the greatest coach of all time. So obviously it's a wait and see approach, but it's just funny how people would be going nuts if it was Todd Nelson. But because it's Scott Arniel, it's basically just like, good, now we'll wait and see. And that's what it should be like. It should be like that for Todd Nelson if he came and said all those things. And Matt Hyman asking here, when can we expect the assistant coaches being hired? Maybe
I've
Todd
been wondering
Nelson's
about
looking
that.
for, I think I do think it'll be this week or next week. Because Arniel at his presser made it seem like it was pretty imminent that he was gonna like get working, get a list going, get on the phones
I
and
do think
get
this is
his
going to be
assistants done.
more extensive than I honestly think the head coaching search was.
Yeah.
Um, you know, just
Yeah.
because like they acknowledge the fact that they need someone who has experience running a successful special teams unit.
Yeah.
So I think
And that's
that's
that's actually
that's
something we
priority
didn't
number
talk about.
one.
Yeah. We didn't talk about Lauer being let go on Thursday's episode. If you
Oh
want
yeah,
to just quickly dive into that and what that means for the Jets going forward.
you know, best of luck to Brad Lauer wherever he you know winds up. I know there was some talk that Toronto actually might be interested in bringing him over.
Really?
Um, yeah, I can't remember where I saw that, but I saw it pop up somewhere. But It's a situation where I think that it was natural for that relationship to end because, as we know, that power play without Gabe Vilardi, which was for a lot of the season, not
Yeah,
good, not good at all.
not good.
And you can't run your power play specifically out of one player and then have no idea what to do outside of that. You need to have a system that works for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that that should be question number one in the interview with a possible special teams coach in saying, all right, what are you doing with our unit to make us successful compared to other teams? Right. So, we saw how without Velarde, they just revert back to passive umbrella, pass it around the outside and, hope for an opening. If that's the answer that you get from one of these coaches, the interview should end immediately.
You should end the Zoom call immediately.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that you say that because the head coaching interview process, as per Kevin Shoveldayoff and Scott Arniel at the presser and in the scrum afterwards, was they had a long meeting with Arniel. It took like a full day, they said, like many, many hours in one day, long interview. And then they interviewed two other people, both on Zoom. Now, it was reported that they interviewed Craig Berube, Todd McClellan, and Dean Evison. So whichever one of those you think, or maybe it's a completely off the board, but they interviewed, Shoveldayoff said they interviewed two other people and they were both on Zoom. Arniel was the only in-person interview. So
Yeah,
not a very
it was
extensive
Scott
search.
Arniel, S. Arniel, and Arniel, comma Scott.
And Scotty A. Yeah, that was their head coaching list, 1 through 4. But yeah, hey, here we are. But yeah, Brad Lauer. It's always so funny how Kevin Shoveldayoff stands up there and says it's mutually beneficial, or we mutually agreed upon this. It's like, yeah, okay. I don't know about that, but like you said, the power play needs to be better. Velarde should be like the A1 threat on that unit, but he can't be the thing that makes it viable and like league average or just above league average. So
I think we need to figure out a new spot for Mark Scheifele on there because, over the past several seasons, him along that half wall there is just not working.
That might be the first question I would ask in an interview to a power play.
Where are you putting Mark Scheifele?
Where's Mark Scheifele on your power play? Yeah, and if they say in the bumper, you're hired. Welcome aboard.
Like that's I don't understand why that was never something that they went back to because that's where he was so successful. I guess I understand that maybe they just don't think they have a shot threat on the left half wall there because ever since Line left, they haven't.
Right.
But operate someone there who knows how to pass the puck through traffic, maybe Cole Perfetti. And then you have Kyle Connor on the other side to function as sort of the right hand, the right side, what Line was when the power play was actually good. Scheifele in the bumper. You have Velarde down net front and in and behind the net. And then you've got a bomb from the point. There you go.
And it's not like the power play was so good that they couldn't change it. Like, when was the last time you remember Mark Scheifele scoring a one-timer from the dot? Like Line-esque. Like, I know he's not.
I honestly can't remember.
I know he doesn't have like the Line shot. Like, that's not what makes him a first line center in the NHL. It's his passing, it's his play driving offensively, and that is totally great. But his one-timer from like the dot is not scaring teams. Like, I don't know why that's a solution for the power play. And Doug saying they don't have a shot threat from anywhere on the power play, and that is the problem. No big shot threat.
I think the biggest thing that I noticed this year was Kyle Connor was passing up shooting opportunities on the power play when he had a clearer shot than he would have had if he didn't wait. Like, I feel like
if anyone's going to be a shooting option, it's him too. Yeah. Yeah. And then I just said that about Scheifele. You talk about Morrissey, who doesn't really shoot on the power play. Like, sometimes he'll just float a wrister in for deflections, which I love those kind of shots on power plays, but you rarely ever see him go with the full clapper. In the playoffs, he did it more and actually scored a few times in the playoffs. So
yeah,
maybe he'll carry that
in front sometimes when you do that. Like, if you mix that in a hard shot from the point, which Morrissey has a hard shot that he just doesn't use,
that he can just locate,
fire it in there. Yeah, they then think, oh, Morrissey's going to shoot from the point. that might open someone else up.
Yeah.
I understand that we're watching very much from a distance, but they have the film too. Like they should see
Mhm.
that guys are telegraphing where the puck is going.
Yeah. And honestly, this comment from Matt Hyman, an aggressive PK in practice should better prepare the power play for games, is a good point too. Like this power play was going up against the super passive penalty kill that we saw all season long in practice every day. So yeah, when Josh Morrissey's at the point, he's got all day to just think about it, and then slide it over to Kyle Connor, who can think about it and pass up a shooting opportunity maybe because there's no pressure on him. And I honestly, what do you think is more important? Getting a power play coach who, will move things around and maybe get the unit itself, if Velarde's there or not, to a league average, like a forward thinking power play coach, or a PK coach who makes the PK aggressive? What do you think is more important?
That's tough. That's a very tough question.
Yeah.
My gut first thought was power play because with the way the league is going, I think that the offensive approach of I'm going to outscore you, try and keep up
Mm,
is the way that the rest of the league is going. And
totally.
I think that whoever they pick up on the penalty kill will even if they change nothing, it's going to be just below league average. And if you can outscore your problems on the power play, you're probably going to go further.
Yeah.
Um, because let's be real, like there's only a finite amount of you know changes offensively in terms of what's swinging a game, and it's
Yeah.
gonna matter more, I think, if they can somehow muster another 10-15 power play goals in a year. um let's be real, like even with a below league average penalty kill, they still gave up less than 200 goals last year.
Yeah.
Like, so I think it's more important to get that offense out of the guys who should be scoring on the power play than it is to, obviously, I think there needs to be some form of newfound aggression on that, that penalty kill there. But I think finally getting back to a point where you can reliably count on the power play to give you a chance to score every time they're out there, I think that's more important just right off the bat there for them.
Yeah. I agree with the points you made. I think for me personally, I think it's got to be the penalty kill coach. Just for some of the reasons you mentioned too. Like this team let up less than 200 goals, won the Jennings Trophy. Hellebuck's going to win the Vezina, and they still had a bottom 10, bottom 7 unit. The year before, they were 7th best in the NHL. So I just feel like that dominant PK, like defensive juggernaut, top 5 penalty kill is like deep down in this team, and they need the right coach to kind of. Sorry, I hit my mic. They need the right coach to maybe like
And
bring that
fired
out
up.
of them. Yeah. Boom. No, I think they might need the right coach to bring that out of them. And I think there is an elite penalty kill in the makings here, but it's just not there right now. As for the power play,
Yep.
if everyone's healthy, I think Velarde's good enough that they'll be league average at minimum, like at the side of the net, because he can just do so much that there doesn't even have to be a
Just got to
scheme.
stay on the ice.
He's just got to stay on the ice, which is the kind of the story of his career, going into a contract year. But I think, yeah, consistency, like the wild swings in the power play as well were crazy.
You
Like,
go, 30 attempts without scoring, and then they would score 7 power play goals in 10 games. And then
yeah,
you're like, oh, we're back, baby. And then they would
and
go for another 10 games without scoring.
yeah,
And yeah, I
I
feel
don't know.
like, yeah, the only thing consistent about that team last year was that they were inconsistent.
The special teams, the 5
Yeah.
on 5 was no complaints there all season long. I mean, there were some times, it's an 82 game season. You're not going to win the 5 on 5 battle every single night.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But you finish 4th best in the league with mediocre special teams. You're a pretty good 5 on 5 team. You win the Jennings with a bottom 10 PK. You're a pretty good defensive 5 on 5 team. Which it's a lot easier to say that now as opposed to right after the end of the playoffs, because I feel like the effects of the playoffs have kind of worn off for me. And then you look back on the season that was, and not just the 5 games that they got shredded, which they did, and those are the 5 most important games of the year, and that
Yep.
makes sense. But they're also a really good team, and I think this is a really good question too, on the topic of their really good team, will they be next year? Sean Monahan. I believe it was Mike McIntyre, Kid Weeb of the Winnipeg Free Press, who wrote in their sort of newsletter saying the Jets are trying to bring Monahan back. Elliot Freeman said it on 32 Thoughts as well. What do you think about Monahan coming back? And this question here on the look of the power plays, he was so good in the bumper too. Like Velarde down low, Monahan in the bumper also was fantastic. What do you think about the reports recently that the Jets are looking to bring Monahan back? I know we've talked about this before, but maybe just now that it's picking up some steam.
Yeah, I mean, it's not shocking. Like it's kind of been out since the end of season press conferences that they're try and work together to find something that works. I think it's
Okay.
harder than what people think is going to happen here, because I know that, especially with what they talked about, in the exit interviews too, where players were asking about, okay, so Brad Lambert, Rucker McGorty, where are they going to fit into the plans here?
Yeah.
So, I'm not going to rehash this because I went, for about 10 minutes last time we talked about this, but
Yeah.
what happens when Brad Lambert's ready as a center and then you don't have a spot for him, right? So there's that. But to bring it back to the, the power play here, I think that the Monahan situation, for me, the biggest thing is if Monahan does not come back, you do not have a choice unless you sign someone to move Scheifele back into the bumper.
Yeah.
He's the only other one who can do it as well as Monahan, I think, because they've tried to force other people in there. Doesn't really work.
No.
Scheifele's biggest successes, whether it was playoffs or in regular season, on the power play have come when he is in that bumper spot. And he's really good at finding that space. And I don't know why he hasn't played there recently, but I think that if Monahan is not back, I don't think they have a choice but to, put Scheifele back there and see what happens.
And I'll even go further on that. The best like power play success of Mark Scheifele's career when he was in the bumper was when Blake Wheeler was quarterbacking it on the right, who we know, elite passer, and one of the best Jets since they've returned. Cole Perfetti could be like, okay, not one of the best Jets since they returned. I worded that poorly.
No, the
but
elite passer.
he's a really good passer, is what I'm trying to say. And if you have a really good passer who can find Scheifele in those pockets on the bumper, I think that could work. And again, that could have worked last year, but it just they had their set power play and they had their set lines too. And it just seemed like, yeah, these guys are getting hurt, but this is our lineup. Whether you like it or not, this is our power play. This is what we're doing. Connor, Scheifele, Velarde, top line, despite all the evidence that they're getting caved in nightly, right? Like it just seemed like the power play. Yep, these guys are going here. We're not changing a thing. There was like a few games of Ehlers on the top unit, and it was like, okay, at least you're trying something else. But yeah, there were a lot of issues with the power play last year, and the fact that it just stayed the same is honestly maybe the most concerning. Mark Stewart for the Edmonton Oilers. Is he a great PK coach, or is it the players he's working with? I'd honestly say he's a great PK coach. He has a goalie with like a sub 900 save percentage, and they've killed like every penalty in the playoffs. It's nuts.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just like team philosophy too, and they're very, very fast.
Yes.
Which means he has changed his philosophy, because the Mark Stewart as a player penalty kill philosophy is, let's see how many times I can cross check this guy before they call it. And he's like sawing a dude in half in front of the net, and he just keeps looking over at the ref and they're not calling it. So that was the one that I thought, but clearly he's adjusted something in his philosophy to, get more aggressive in terms of turning it up ice and not aggressive in the fact that you're, committing armed assault in front of the net. But I do think though that there is actually a level of him being aware of the current, structure of successful penalty kill units.
Yeah, I agree. This question here from Samson, I don't know. Like, I look at Colorado, and they're clearly just like a fast rush skill up and down the lineup team. I guess they're like grunt workers would be a Val Nichushkin, who's no longer playing, or I guess the whole team's no longer playing, but he got suspended mid-round in that second round against Dallas. Maybe a Josh Manson. But then when you compare Colorado to the Jets, like you've got Brendan Dillon, you've got Adam Lowry, you got Nino Niederreiter. Like these are like grunt workers. I think every team could use a little bit more of that. Like every team could use a Matthew Tkachuk and an Alexander Barkov. Like that would be ideal. But it's really hard to find like top 6 players who are skilled enough to put up 100 points, Matthew Tkachuk, and also just like a pest and like great on the forecheck. Like that's tough to find because it's usually one or the other. It's usually either your Brandon Tanev or your Kyle Connor. Like that's the the top 9 forward kind of swing there, in my opinion. I think it might be this. I think whether or not they bring back like a Monahan and then instead bring in a Lambert, like they could go really skilled in the top 6 here starting this year, and we'll see. Then that'll more clearly answer that question, I think. I know most people love what Lowry does, but do you ever see a situation where he plays some wing and opens up a center spot? Crazy question. I don't see it.
I don't
I
see
think
it.
he got Selke votes. I mean, even though it was Bones and they're bringing in a new coach, like I don't see Arniel moving Lowry to the wing at all. Like him and Niederreiter are so good together. I don't see it. If they really look at analytics, the lines can't be the same as last year. I saw this tweet, I believe it was from Nick Lynham, who was like, we'll really know if they take this analytics summit seriously day 1 of training camp, because if Connor and Scheifele are playing together, we know it was all a lie. It's like, well, maybe. I don't know. Well, the lines, oh man, can't wait to tweet lines again. That's just so much fun. Training camp, people freaking out because certain players are playing together. It's great. It's great. Do you have anything else on the Jets in general before we go to break here?
I kind of want to touch back on the grunt worker idea.
Yeah.
And I want to highlight the last few years. They didn't do it as well in the last couple here, but what Tampa did in their cup run years,
Yeah.
where they don't get the grunt workers in terms of, yeah, this guy, he's big, he hits, he doesn't do a whole lot else. I think the way the league is going is they find guys like the Blake Colemans of the league who are offensively really gifted, but knows when to forecheck well. You know, the Brandon Hagels. Yep.
Oh, one of my favorite players in the league. I know it's weird, but seriously, the guy is a machine. He's one of the best. He's one of the most underrated and one of the best forwards in the league. Like
they're not gonna
maybe not. Yeah,
they're not gonna kill you on the puck. Like they are
Yeah.
not big guys, but they are smart with how they play. Like even like as you said, like a Brandon Tanev who's gonna go in there and jar it loose, but he's not big.
No.
So I feel like the idea, and I've seen this a lot too, and I'm not, soloing in here on Samson here, where I've seen a general idea of, the Jets need to get, bigger and stronger. If you kind of go for size and not forechecking, and equate the two, you're
Yeah.
going to fall behind because those guys are typically slower. So I think that they have to find those guys that like a Tampa found, where they have the offensive skill, they have the ideas to when the best time to forecheck is to jar the puck loose and then get that puck up in transition. Those are the guys you need to find. And I have to do more of a deep dive on who those type of player would be available. But I think that they need to kind of model themselves after those, Tampa Cup winning years, because, the Colemans, the Hagels, even like a Barclay Goodrow at that time when they acquired him. Obviously now he's fallen off. But at that time when they acquired him, it was like, oh my God, that's a insane amount to pay for him. He was a key player in their cup run in 2019, right? So I think that it matters a lot the type of grit you find, because grit for grit's sake isn't going to get you anywhere if you're, getting walked at the blue line every time by some guy who's way faster.
Yeah. Yeah. If you go get a bunch of Pat Maroons and Ryan Reeves, like you're tougher, but you're not better. But if you go get Brandon Hagel, you're both. Yeah, that move has been such like a win-win deal. The 2 firsts for Brandon Hagel. But Brandon Hagel, not one of the best forwards in the league, but definitely one of the most underrated forwards in the league. And every time I watch a Tampa game, every time I watch a Tampa game, I just see him like flying around like he's Brandon Tanev, and then he'll make a play on a 2-on-1. That's like he'll one time it with the puck in his feet and go bar down. It's like this guy's like the perfect mix of a player. He's such a stud, and they had him on such a good contract when they acquired him. And I think his contract is coming up soon, I believe. I might be wrong on that, but and then here's an example. They went and got Tanner Jeannot for like an entire draft class, and that hasn't really worked out because he's big, he's tough, but he's not skilled enough to work in that system at the same time. They were going for the same thing, but they misevaluated. Yeah, let's see. Doug saying Paul Edmonds said he expects Lambert to crack the Jets lineup next season. If they sign Monahan and Lambert proves his worth, then Monahan is the 3C. I mean, it's a good problem to have. It's interesting though, because all the contract projections for Monahan are like 4 million or higher. So would you pay that for a 3C for the short term? Like, I don't know. I would expect Lambert to crack the Jets lineup at some point next year too. Maybe not right at the start, but like you said, Brian, if you re-sign Monahan, you're blocking Lambert through the whole season, not just or in case of an injury, sure he could come up, but yeah, I don't know. Where are you at on that? Is Monahan the 3C if Lambert like is wows in training camp?
See, I don't know, and I feel like the more I think about it, we're barreling towards a situation where they start playing Lambert on the wing just to get him in the lineup.
I
And
know.
I hate that because Brad Lambert has taken leaps and bounds as a player since moving to center. He was, all rookie team. He was second in rookie scoring in his first ever year playing full time as a professional center. And to take that and then to move him off that position, I think is a disservice to Lambert. And I know obviously he has to earn that spot, but I think he's to the point where if he continues his development path, which obviously we assume he will next year, with that being his rookie season.
Yeah.
I don't really know, as you said, I don't know if Monahan's accepting third line center money. And I don't know if the Jets are confident in paying a third line center $4 million. And yeah, I think that you can't have it both ways with this situation where either you want Brad Lambert to make the lineup this year, or you sign Sean Monahan and block him for a year just so you can make sure he can play center.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, this is a good point too. Monahan can play wing and still take the important faceoffs. Like Monahan could play on Lambert's wing. And then when the faceoff's on the left side, when it's in the defensive zone, he'll take the draw. I don't know. Lowry's making, I believe, 3.5.
Which would then make him a $3.9 million fourth line center if he continues the center position.
Yeah. Well, or they could go
thing, right?
Monahan, Lowry, Niederreiter on the third line, but I don't think they're well.
That's a very expensive third line.
Yes, maybe Arniel will be the guy to break up Lowry and Appleton, who have played together. I don't know. We'll see, but I think it would be 3.25. Thank you, Matt. I think signing Monahan would definitely either stint Brad Lambert's development as a center or push him to the wing entirely next season or the year after, depending on term. And I don't know. Do you want to do that? Because this is a great point here from Twitter. 2016 repeat, go with the youngsters. Like this year and next year, we've talked about it.
18 playoff run, more than half the team was under 25 at that point.
Yeah. Well, Line A, Ehlers, Connor were all 22 or younger. Scheifele was 24. Lowry was in his prime, and so was Stastny was at the end of his career. Sorry, and then Lowry was younger too, 23. Josh Morrissey was young.
I mean, at that point
Jacob
too,
Trouba was young. Yeah, very young team. And obviously it was a down year, and they leapfrogged forward the next year, in 2016. But we've talked about it a lot. We think over the next 2 years, there's going to be a youth movement in a sense. You're going to see Lambert, Chibrikov, McGroarty, Salamonson. All of these players, I think, are going to play a role in the next 2 seasons for the Jets. And yeah, helps with the cap. You have the entry-level contracts. You just paid Scheifele and Hellebuck $8.5 per year. You're probably going to pay one of Ehlers or Connor over these next 2 off seasons. So you're going to have to get these entry-level contracts. It does help that you're getting like double the value on Josh Morrissey's contract. That went from one of the worst contracts in the league to one of the best because the COVID years he was struggling. That decor was an abomination. He was playing with like Tucker Pullman 24 minutes a night. So no wonder his analytics were pretty bad. But honestly, like that contract has opened up a lot. I think it opened up the ability to sign a Scheifele and Hellebuck for 8.5 a year, because you have Josh Morrissey at 6 for the next like 6 years, 5 years, something like that. It's great. What about Perfetti at center? It's a great question, because last year going into training camp, it was the whole, who's going to be center? Is it going to be Perfetti or
He got
Velarde?
3 games.
He got 3 games at center and he was bumped, and then Nemestikov came in and that was that. He could be a center going forward. Not even with Brad Lambert in the mix. Brad Lambert could be pushed to the wing. I don't know. But Perfetti's played on the wing. He's been okay. He's been good on the wing when he's been in the lineup. He could be Lambert's winger. I don't know. He was okay with Ehlers. Like, that line was good at times, but Perfetti was better with other players like Kyle Connor. He actually like thrived with Connor in their limited minutes. So I don't know. What do you think about the potential of having Perfetti at center?
I think it lines up with the idea of what Arniel was saying with making sure they give him that shot in the top 6. But, with the conversation we've just had about Monahan and Lambert in the mix for that second line center role, it doesn't feel like Perfetti has been in that mix at all in that conversation.
Yeah.
It feels more likely than not he's going to be a winger unless otherwise needed. Like, if there's a let's say they re-sign Monahan, right? And they're not 100% sold on the fact that Lambert's going to be ready to step in right after training camp. I think Perfetti might be the next guy up in that situation where you might need a center on that second line. And then, you wait and see what Lambert's doing down in the AHL. And it could be like a Kyle Connor situation where doesn't make the team out of camp, plays 11 games down with the Moose, and then, tears it up in those 11 games and they bring him back up. Right. So,
right. Exactly. I feel like you could be seeing that a lot over the next couple of years with all these young players like Nikita Kibrikov. Is he a Jet next year? Because he's 21, 22 years old, getting to that age where they graduate from the AHL to the NHL, had a great year in the AHL, scored in his one and only game this year in his NHL debut, the game winner. So I don't know. I don't know. That this is a great question though, and it's something I think we're going to be discussing a lot this offseason. Brian, let's take a quick break. You're going to hear a word from DraftKings. And when we come back, we're going to quickly touch on the seasons of the Goldeyes, Bombers, and Sea Bears, talk about the Cup finals, the conference finals, and then take some questions from you guys and wrap it up. As we're here Sunday, LFP Live. Thank you everyone who's here chatting. We really appreciate it. You're going to hear a word from DraftKings. Stick around. We'll be right back.
we're this close to crowning the Stanley Cup champion, and with the action heating up on the ice, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. New to DraftKings? Listen up. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5 and you'll get a bonus bet back equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500 if your first bet doesn't hit. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, licensee partner Golden Nugget, Lake Charles. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/hockey for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Copyright NHL 2024, all rights reserved.
Welcome back in to the 15th edition of LFP Live. Brian, let's get into the summer sports a little bit. You're there, you got the Goldeyes hat on. Just maybe quickly run through today's game. I was at the Sea Bears game last night and the Bombers game on Friday, so I'll quickly roll through those, and then we will have updated with people on the Winnipeg summer sports scene. But the Fish playing today at 1.
Yeah, so they have come off a couple of tough games here to start off against the Lincoln Salt Dogs. They've dropped the first 2 games of the series, looking to salvage out a win to finish out this one before they pick it up tomorrow against the Kane County Cougars. Today I think that the biggest thing for them is looking for both starter and bullpen to limit the the base runners, because something that really hurt them, especially last night, was essentially any player who got on base ended up coming around to score in the later innings there, where
Mhm.
I think too that they need to work on holding the runner. There was a few guys that stole into scoring position, and then I know Lincoln as well really worked the hit and run to their advantage. So I think it's something that needs to be on their radar a little bit more today. I know that there was some question marks as to who's actually starting, because there was some injury concerns, some guys who were banged up a little bit. But depending on who's going today, it might be a day where you get a few more innings out of your bullpen, and we're going to need a decent amount of limiting of the base runners here, because the walks, the little slap singles, it's coming back to bite them.
Mhm.
But they've had a really successful last couple weeks here. They've won 3 series coming into this one. Obviously, they've dropped this series to Lincoln, but if they can come out of here with a win and then go into the last 3 games of this homestand and and positioned well, I think that it'd be a nice way to sort of end things off before heading out on the road for a few.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to the game today, 1 o'clock. If you can, goldeyes.com/tickets. If you're unable to, aabaseball.tv. It's free this year. You can watch the game online, or you can listen to it 93.7 CJNU with Trevor Curl, voice of the Gold Eyes.
That's
Should
his
be a
booth
nice
right back
day.
there.
Yeah, there you go. Should be a nice day until it might not be, but we will see. We will see.
Oh,
Either
just
way,
quickly, it sounds like we are going to get Zach Reininger starting today.
there you go.
He was the question mark. He missed his last start when they were in Fargo
Mm.
with some tightness. So, just check the game release from yesterday. It looks like Zach Reininger will be on the bump. I will say Ryder Yakel stepped in last game that Reininger had to miss in Fargo, and he threw 5 really good innings. So they were well set up today, regardless. But it's a good thing that you've got a former major leaguer on the mound, so he knows well enough how to control a game in terms of if he picks up on some things that aren't going well, he's really good at sort of picking those out and figuring out how to limit it. And so that'll be a nice boost to have him back after missing only just 1 start.
Absolutely. Yeah, stay on the lookout for that game, 1 o'clock today. Hopefully the weather complies with with the people trying to go to the game.
Well, I always like to say this: the weather at the time of at the time of first pitch, we have no idea how that is, but we also can't predict it. So as far as we know,
Yep.
today is going to be par for the course. If it's raining somewhere else in the city but not here, we're fine. And
We're
that has
fine.
no
Yeah,
bearing on here.
exactly.
To quote the fantastic PA
Mhm.
voice of the Winnipeg Gold Eyes, Ron Arnst, it may be raining in Charleswood, but that doesn't mean it's raining downtown.
There you go. Exactly. Just real quick on the Sea Bears last night, they got their second straight win, 93-80 over the Ottawa Blackjacks. Kind of just a defensive battle through and through. And then the game, don't tell Elliot, he'll probably he has issues with this, but the game ended on a free throw. Again, I agree with him. Anticlimactic ending. It's the
Elliot's
target
going to
score.
burst in here.
Yeah, it's the target score. There's supposed to be this huge like game winner every game, and then it's just a guy at the line hitting 3 shots. But they did foul him on a 3. It was JOJ who got fouled, and he was at the line for 3 free throws. So I guess that's less anticlimactic. Like you foul a guy on a 3-pointer, that game should end that way. But another great atmosphere. I think it was 8,500 people inside
Yeah.
Canada Life Center last night. Great crowd. Super fun Sea Bears games. And the team is winning. So what more could you ask for? As for the Bombers, I was at the preseason
Not
game on
winning.
Friday. It was rough. I mean, they didn't play anyone, so it was kind of expected.
This feels like
But
way
man,
more extreme than it has in the last years in terms of them just not
yeah.
playing their starters at all.
Yeah, like no starter. Like in Saskatchewan, maybe for a drive or two, like Strevler played, Lawler played. But
Like they're really giving their guys a lot of just like practice time, but not game action. And I understand the fear of the injuries, but at some point or another, they got to get into some game action, because let's be
yeah,
real. Like if you come into week 1 and all of your starters have played like a quarter, I'm not overly happy with that, because like I'm worried about the game speed.
but like they're also so banged up that I think they're just prioritizing health. And they're like, you know what, if we start like 4-5, we have faith that we can still come back as a healthy team and scrape into the playoffs or something. Like if that were to happen, I think that's the thought process. They did announce their cuts this morning, 30 minutes ago. And the one highlight from Friday night, Chris Smith with a 109-yard punt return TD was awesome. He got cut because he seemingly won the job, but he got hurt in the game. So that is, I know that's terrible because
well, also
the
the same
Bombers,
week that the news drops that the Argos signed Janarian Grant too. So
right? Yeah,
um,
I was gonna say, like, Jadarian Grant's not there anymore. You need a new returner. This guy, Chris Smith, American running back, takes a 109-yarder to the house, and then gets hurt in the game, which really does suck because for him and the Bombers, they're kind of left at a bad spot there. If they didn't play Thursday, it might have been different. This is a good point. Their home opener it's a short week on a preseason, like kind of makes no sense. The core is older too, that is for sure. And some guys like Oliveira is like a question mark for week one. Big Hill's not playing week one. Like some of the big names, Jefferson, Claros don't have to play in the preseason. You know, they'll be okay. So yeah, that's that. That's the summer sports roundup. Quickly on the Stanley Cup playoffs, Brian. Tonight, Edmonton can get back to the Stanley Cup Finals. Canadian team. The Panthers are waiting for them. Alexander Barkov didn't touch the trophy, as they did touch it last year. They didn't touch
Paul
it this
Maurice
year.
looked at him and goes, "Don't you?" Probably explicit of touch it.
Yeah,
I will say, like, listen, we had our disagreements with Paul Maurice, several of them, and I just don't think he was the right coach for the Jets roster at that time. But what I do miss is his media work because, man, getting the clips externally from what he's doing in that Florida media room is some of the best content I have seen in years out of the NHL.
Yeah, he has so much fun with it, and he knows it. Like he knows what he's doing. And there's also a pattern, and a lot of the beat writers here in Winnipeg have brought it up, who were beat writers when he was the coach. And they say, like, after a terrible performance by his team, that's when he'll say something in the post-game media that people will run with to kind of take the heat off of his team. Like it's really an art. Like he really is just saying things to get like people riled up after his team loses, and then he's just like, the heat is off my team or my goalie or whatever the case may be, right? But yeah, I do miss his media work. He's great. The tonight Western Conference Finals. Do you think Edmonton ends it on home ice and books their ticket to the Stanley Cup Finals?
I have an inclination that Dallas evens it up. That's 2 straight games now where I just have been very underwhelmed by the Stars' performance.
Yeah,
and it looks very unlike them. And I think that I have just a weird gut feeling that they get back to it a little bit more tonight. But no, I think that one goes 7, and I think Florida rests up and feels healthy and ready to roll for the Cup final.
Interesting. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Edmonton comes out flying tonight, but it's the biggest game they've played in the McDavid era.
For sure.
So what's the pressure do on the rest of the team, right? What does Stuart Skinner do tonight? Because let's be real, he's never played a game bigger than this. So I think that if Skinner is even just like league average, I think Edmonton's heading on over to the Cup final tonight. But I don't think you can like book that because it's been far from a guarantee.
Book it.
And before anyone asks, and I've been asked this a lot already, if Edmonton goes to the Cup final, I'm cheering for Florida.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
I don't like Edmonton. I'm telling you, man.
I think I'm a little biased. I have a lot of people in my life, weirdly, that are Oilers fans and like huge Oilers fans. So for them,
I'm the total opposite. My entire family hates the Oilers.
See, I am the opposite for sure. So for them, I want to see the Oilers win, but even like I want to see Connor McDavid win a title. I don't care if it's on the Oilers. If he was on, maybe not the Leafs, but if he was on Florida, I'd be cheering. Like he's the best player in the league. I want to see him win titles. this is the generation we are growing up in. I want to see the best player win titles. Like, imagine rooting against like Wayne Gretzky. It's like, okay. I shouldn't say saying that to Jets fans is tough though. Like, I don't know. It's the best player. Like Sidney Crosby. There's maybe a better example. I don't want to see him win a cup. No, I don't. Why? He's the best
Well, I
player
mean,
in the league.
I don't
He's
care as much
Canadian.
about the
What's the
singular
problem?
players. Like,
Like,
for me, it's teams. Like,
it's all
McDavid
for me.
like McDavid could win a cup on whoever. It doesn't matter. But I am not cheering for the Oilers, McDavid or not. Right. So,
Really? Okay.
yeah, no, for me, like the whole thing with that is, I don't particularly care to see Ken Holland, walk into another cup situation. So,
True.
you
know what?
just
You
handed
raise a great point.
loads of talent and then walks away with hardware after riding those guys there after a bunch of mediocre deadline acquisitions for like the 38th year in a row. Yeah, but no, I feel like I for me, I don't have an issue with McDavid at all. Like that's the thing. Like as you said, I think him winning the cup is good for his legacy and it's good for the league for the best player to win cups. But in the household that I grew up in, I was told, hey, these Oilers, we don't care for them.
They suck. Yeah.
Like, and then I people make such a huge deal about Canadian teams winning cups. And like I understand that it hasn't happened since 93, but we have to also realize there's only 7. Like it's the odds are so incredibly stacked against. It's not some conspiracy. Just build better teams, right? So like this is the first opportunity they have, but I'm not going out of my way to be like, oh, they're a Canadian team, I'm cheering for them. Like I know a lot of people are.
Right.
Like there's select Canadian. That's the thing. Like it's a personal preference, right? So like I'll be honest.
Yeah.
If Vancouver made the cup final, I'd probably cheer for them. If I was gonna say the Senators, but like, that's never gonna happen again. But like
We're
like
right
there's
here
a
in Winnipeg,
situation,
baby.
yeah. Like obviously, like that's the whole thing. But like externally, it's not some huge needle mover for me just because they're in a Canadian market and.
No, I don't think that moves the needle for me either. Like, I think it does play a factor for me though. Like, I don't know, Canadian teams. I think if the Jets were the last team standing, I'd want Edmonton fans to cheer for the Jets because they're Canadian. Like, I don't like it's not like Canada versus America. Well, it will be in the First Nations face off in the Olympics coming up.
Yeah.
With the best on best, which will be super fun. But again, that's not the main reason I'm cheering for the Oilers, but I think it's a reason, like the fact that they're a Canadian team. They haven't won in a long time. Sure, that's cool enough for me. Yeah, a US based. Wow. That is a not so fun fact. A US based CFL team has won the Grey Cup more recently than a Canadian based NHL team has won the Stanley Cup. Like that's where I think it comes from for me. It's been so long where Canadian, and it's like, again, I'll have no like, yes, the Oilers finally won a cup. Now all Canadian teams can rest. It's like, no, it'd be cool to see a Canadian team win a cup just for Canada. I think again, not all of Canada.
I'm just here. But I want to see Dmitry Kulikov lift the cup.
No, no.
Kevin Stenlund.
You're right. Paul Maurice passes it to Kulikov, passes it to Stenlund,
and then no one else gets
it. Done. Yeah, and
then turning the TV
Jets
off.
Fans turn the TV off. Yeah, exactly. Anyways, let's do a really quick questions portion of today's episode. As always, at the end of LFP Live, we open up the chat. You guys ask whatever you want. We ask, or it could be about the Jets. It could be about the Bombers, Sea Bears, Gold Eyes, Stanley Cup playoffs, anything you want, food, coffee. Love talking about anything. We've been talking for 53 minutes. We love to talk. But hey, thank you for joining us Sunday morning. Slow news week, but it doesn't matter. You're all here chatting. We really appreciate it. Yeah, looking forward to today's Gold Eyes game. Today's this week's Bomber game, getting to Princess Auto Stadium again. Super pumped. And then the just real quick, the Sea Bears on the road now for 4 games. So the next time they come back, I believe, is mid-June, June 13th or 14th, something like that. So a while for the Sea Bears, but lots of Gold Eyes and Bombers games in the process. Yeah, where's Sammy Smokes again? It's a great question, Matt Hyman. 2 weeks in a row, might have to have a chatting. No, but seriously, drop your questions below. We'll try to get to as many as we can here before we wrap up the episode. First question: with the talent disparity, the age of the core, the defensive issues, and new coaching staff, are the Jets in closer to a cup/deep playoff run or rebuild retool? This is a great question, Brian. What do you think they're closer to? A deep playoff run or a rebuild?
You're just going to me first because you don't know your answer yet, do you?
Well, we'll see what you say. I can go first. I think they're closer to. I think they're in a retool now. Maybe not now. Maybe next year. I think they're in a retool with all these young players coming in. I've said this all along, and I'll say it again. As long as Connor Hellebuck is under contract with the Winnipeg Jets, they will not rebuild, and they shouldn't. Like, they simply, I don't think they can be bad enough to where they have a top 10 pick or a top 5 pick in with Connor Hellebuck. Like, I know it's possible, but I just can't fathom that. And again, with Josh Morrissey on the contract that he's on for the next 5 years, like, I just don't think a rebuild is really possible. Retool is more likely. And I think like they're close to a deep playoff run. Like, they're the 4th best team in the league, maybe a few tweaks here and there, but they got embarrassed in the first round. I think they're closer to a retool, but I wouldn't be shocked if they win 2 rounds next year. Like, if they bring back most of the team,
They're
maybe
like right on
Brad
the
Lambert,
precipice of both.
like, right, which is why it's such a great
kind of a
question.
cop-out.
Like, it's
Like-
no, but it really is such a great question, because if Brad Lambert doesn't develop next year and he takes an extra year, they don't re-sign Sean Monahan, and Perfetti doesn't work at center, then they're retooling, like knocking on the door of rebuilding. But if they re-sign Monahan, Lambert hits, they move Monahan to wing, they bring back Dylan DeMello, they trade Ehlers for a top 4 right-hand D, and Perfetti takes a huge step forward, like, then you're on the cusp of another deep playoff run. So I think it's really close, but if I had to pick one, I think they're closer to like a mini retool where there may be a wild card team or like just miss the playoffs one year, to then come back with this new wave of forward talent that they've been drafting for the last couple of years. Where are you at on that?
Yeah, I feel like I line up kind of closely with what you were saying there, and it's a very interesting situation where I don't recall sort of the questions that I have. Like, I say this all the time, where every year it's different questions, but the series of questions I have about this team now, I don't think I've ever had that combination of questions about, any Jets team that we've kind of covered.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's interesting because, like, there was a clear 2016, like, young, okay, they're building up. 2017, they were great, and then for the next 3 years, they were just that team, and they were contending, and then they lost a ton in COVID, or a ton of players, I mean. Then they slowly been building themselves back up. Last year was, like, again, felt like the pinnacle, but then they were out so quickly in the first round. It was weird. CMAC, good morning. Welcome. Can Rutger be our Matthew Tkachuk, leader, skilled, tough, agitator? I've said this all along. I think he's Nino Niederreiter. Like, I simply do. I think he plays like a hard style. He hits hard. Nino's had some big hits, maybe less this year and more last year. But I think he'll be Matthew Tkachuk, again, 100-point player. Like you said, leader, skilled, tough. Like, he's like, if every player or if every GM could pick up a ideal player in the league that's not like McDavid or McKinnon, it would be Tkachuk, because he's got all of those traits. I think Rutger, if all goes well, he's like a light version of Matthew Tkachuk, where he puts up a 60 points a year and is that leader that's skilled and tough. But I think Matthew Tkachuk is like in a league of his own. I don't think it'll be that high of a ceiling. But what do you think? What do you think Rutger's ceiling is? Nino Niederreiter like kind of par for the course, or on brand for Rutger, maybe?
I'd like to think that Rutger's floor is Nino. Just because Nino is never going to be like the guy who's going to wow you with his offensive skill. And I think Rutger can be a guy who will wow you. And so my idea is
That's a good point.
Combine the Tkachuks. So Brady's not the 100-point guy in Ottawa. Obviously, Matthew is in Florida. Brady, though, isn't as necessarily overtly obvious with his chippiness that Matthew has. But I also think that at least outwardly, he's got more of the sort of noticeable leadership things, especially in tough years in Ottawa, right? So
Yeah.
I think if you combine the two, and then you think of more of a closer scoring touch somewhere between maybe Brady and Nino, that's where he falls. And that's a very convoluted way of saying I think he's going to be very good. He's going to be a great leader. I don't know if he'll be a 100-point guy. I don't even know if he'll be like an 80-point guy, but I think he'll be somewhere. I think you could expect to see him somewhere between 60 and 75 points sort of at his ceiling, and I would be very happy if it gets higher than that. But I mean, I feel like with the expectations need to be tempered at some point with some of the stuff that was being said about Rutger, because I don't think we can expect him to be, a number one guy in the league. But I also think that you can take aspects of other players and say, okay, I see this in him, I see this in him. So
Yeah, exactly. I do think like you said, the expectations need to be tempered. I get the excitement. I'm excited to see Rutger come over as well, like the personality, the leadership, all that stuff. But I think you hit the nail on the head there, like a 65, 70-point guy who also can hit. Like I think that's the realistic. I think that's where we're headed with Rutger McGroarty. And yeah, Jay Miller, he hasn't even played an AHL game, right? He hasn't. We're very early in his career. He's going back to Michigan next year, so. I would have liked to see him come over next year for just his development and play some AHL games and, play in the NHL as well. But what we can hope for, I guess, is that he kills it in Michigan and then they are still bad enough to where his season ends early. And then he comes over and gets like a few NHL, AHL games at the end of the season, maybe a few NHL and then plays the AHL playoffs or something like that.
yeah,
I think with him going back to Michigan, that's probably the ideal scenario going into next year. But yeah, Jay Miller's right. We gotta chill out. We gotta see it. But I think that his style of play just screams Nino Niederreiter to me. Maybe a little bit faster, maybe a little bit more skilled. And obviously the leadership that we've seen many times. And I'm excited for Dev Camp this year because you'll see it again where he's just like on the top of the world at all times. Did you see Tua's brother sign with the Tiger Cats? Can he be QB in the CFL that Tua is for the Dolphins of the NFL? I did not see this. Did you see this,
no,
Brian?
I did not.
Oh, is he's a quarterback? Okay.
I think he was at Maryland.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That's an interesting question. I know the Tiger Cats are supposed to improve this year off of, I mean, they haven't been too great past couple years, but that would be something else if he steps in and then he dominates the CFL and Tua not dominating the NFL, but you know what I mean. Anyways, will the Stars almost playing Bichelle if Tanev can play? Is Salzman ready and will he make the roster next year? I mean,
Next year, no, I don't think so.
No, the year after.
I think he plays a year in the AHL just to get used to the North American ice.
Yeah.
Maybe that's shorter depending on how quickly he acclimates to that. But I feel like he has the ability to, play on any size ice. And I feel actually his game could, benefit from the smaller ice because he's such a pinpoint passer and he moves the puck really well. So I'd be very interested to see how that translates and if maybe his development path is faster than we might think.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see him at Dev Camp 2 and in training camp if they bring him over, things like that. I think that's going to do it, Brian, for the 15th edition of LFP Live. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. Great questions today. Kind of stumped me on that one. That was something I'm going to be thinking about all day now. Where are the Jets closer to a retool or a cup run? That's a great question. Let's get out of here. Thank you once again to everyone for joining us on this Sunday morning at 9 a.m. We really appreciate it. We'll be back next Sunday as well. Maybe talking a little bit more Bombers after their first game, more Gold Eyes. Seabears are now on the road, so maybe they'll take a bit of a step back in our coverage. But regardless, we'll be talking about the Jets. Maybe there's some signings, some assistant coaches maybe get signed this week. We can only hope that we have something other than Scott Arniel to talk about on next week's episode of LFP Live. But join us regardless, 9 a.m. on YouTube. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for coming by. We'll see you next Sunday. Enjoy the Gold Eyes game today. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the Bomber game next week. And we'll see you in the next couple of days. See ya.
See ya.